Once the phrase was, cash is king, but it seems that a new coronation is nigh, with societies around the world adopting contactless, particularly during the pandemic. But just how close is the demise of that wrinkly stuff in our wallets? It's perhaps not surprising as well that the UAE is at the forefront of this conversion, with research, Visa's global back to business study, showing that the UAE's cashless future is imminent. Well, I'm delighted today to be joined on AB Talks by Dr. Saeeda Jaffar, the GCC Group Country Manager for Visa, to unpack all the insights in this latest report. Welcome to AB Talks. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
So, fascinating amount of research in there. Could you start by taking our audience through the headlines?
Sure. As you said, there's a lot happening, so I'll try to unpack this a little by little. So I think we'll start off by saying optimism is in the air, and that's just fascinating to see. 93% of the respondents were very optimistic about what's going to happen and how things will progress. I think the second very important thing to highlight here is both consumers as well as merchants, I should say, have switched to e-commerce, which is another just fascinating thing to see. In fact, e-com today contributes about 58% of the revenues for a lot of the merchants. And, this is only expected to go up as we go forward.
Yeah.
The third very interesting bit that we've noticed is that overall digital payments, even though they're high, they're expected to continue to grow. In fact, 96% of those who responded expect more digital payments in the future. And what we're all looking at, crypto. Crypto is top of mind for a lot of people. Almost 35%, 1 in 3 merchants say they're ready, they're waiting, they're willing for crypto. So that's absolutely on the horizon.
I mean, that one leapt out at me. I mean, there's so much good research in there, but it's fascinating to see merchants saying that they're looking at accepting cryptocurrencies. And I guess there are some reasons why they would, such as Bitcoin as payment, despite it is quite volatile still, though. So there'll be plenty of crypto fans cheering this research, but is this really so close at hand, or are there a few things that need to happen before this actually beds in as a form of payment?
Sure. So look, I think if you look at strictly from a payments perspective, right, there's 3 different kinds of digital currencies, let's say, which can be used as payments. There are the true cryptos, which Bitcoin, Ethereum, these are the most well-known.
Yeah.
But then there's also stable coins such as USDC, USDT, which are digital currencies that are linked to fiat. And then there's the CBDCs.
Yeah.
The second and the third, so the stable coins and the CBDCs are far more stable, and they tend to be much more, far less into a volatile. Crypto, historically, we've seen there's massive volatility associated with it.
Yeah.
So, probably until that is sorted out, there will be a bit more of the ups and downs. But absolutely, when it comes to stable coins and when it comes to CBDCs, I think there is a massive use case for payments. In fact, we're already seeing that. We're using a lot of stable coins on Visa credit cards across the world.
You do remind me of the quick story, and I won't say who told me it, about the guy. I knew someone who had 50 Bitcoin, and he bought it back when it was $5 a pop. And there was a coffee shop even back then when it was $5 that accepted, this was in Vienna, accepted Bitcoin, and he spent anywhere between 5 and 50 Bitcoin on coffee because he thought it was cool. That merchant, that coffee shop, I imagine he's already retired and set for life now.
Assuming he didn't pay it on, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, when he told this story, and he told it on stage, the gasp went around the room, and as they worked out, that's $1.8 million. And I asked him, was it at least good coffee? And he went, no, not so much. I tell you what, I did find also fascinating within this research. It feels like, particularly here in the UAE, that it's not that we're at an inflection point, that we've actually crossed the Rubicon. We've crossed that inflection point on that debate versus cash versus cashless. It's almost a mute argument in some ways. The finding seems to support the view that cashless is now firmly in the lead as the form of payment, and cash and its market share as a form of payment is simply going to diminish over the coming years.
Yeah, and look, this is not surprising to me. So if you look at the UAE from a digital perspective, we are already trailblazing compared to the rest of them. Yeah. If you look at smartphone penetration, we are off the charts. If you look at social media usage, we are off the charts. So it's not surprising that a lot of digital payments would come very, very naturally to us. I think that's one part of it. And it's not only about digital payments. What's really interesting and exciting is it's also about the next generation of digital payments, right? So it's not about just using your card. It's already gone to the next level. So the UAE is amongst the highest in the world when it comes to tapping your card, tapping your phone,
Right.
contactless payments.
Yeah.
They're well in the 90s for that, right? And it's not surprising to me at all. I think this is just the beginning, and we're going to see a lot more come out of this, and we're going to see the UAE trailblaze.
I mean, I was going to come on to that figure towards the end, but do you know what? As you mentioned it now, I mean, one of the figures that was in that research there was it's like just 1% of UAE merchants think they'll continue accepting cash. And there's a massive disparity between them and then Canada, which I don't know, was about 60%, was it? And then it was US, which is around 30%. So we are so, like, even the business world here seems so far ahead of the curve on this conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think especially from a consumer point of view, it, as you said, that ship has sailed, right? The genie's out of the bottle, call it what you may. We are at the forefront of digital payments globally, and I think this is only going to continue. And I think in a large part, yes, we have the demographic, but also if you look at the governments and if you see how fast and how hard the governments have been pushing on a digital agenda, right? Yeah. You look at UAE, look at Saudi, look at so many other countries that very openly say, you know, this is part of our national goals. We will work towards it. So they've developed the infrastructure. We have probably today better infrastructure than a lot of the other countries where cash is still very much used. So I think onwards we'll see this and we'll continue. Like I'll give you an example. I go out, I take my phone, and I don't feel it, not one bit. I go out in the US. I cannot go out with just my phone. I still need to take my card because in half the places it's not yet accepted. So it's it's absolutely on the way.
And indeed, here you can go out with your watch, and you're still. And there was I saw a statistic in there which I thought was really interesting. There was also an abbreviation which I think we're just going to end up using more and more and more, which is IRL, in real life. Which I don't know if I like that or not, but I saw that actually shoppers are now literally abandoning their carts, their shopping carts, if there's no digital payment.
That's right, 68% or so.
68%.
That's right, that they will abandon their purchases because there isn't a digital payment or a suitable digital payments method. That is absolutely right. And this just goes to underscore that, payment is not a way of closing the sale. Yeah. Payment is part of your business.
That convenience. I mean, if we think about that, that's more than 2/3 of shoppers who are prepared to abandon that full shopping cart if they can't pay digitally. The lesson would seem clear to small businesses there. If they heed that lesson, what are the first steps they can take here?
The very first thing that I would look at would be to put yourself in your customer's shoes and say, all right, if I am doing this, what are the pain points? Where is the friction? And then what do I do to just go after this manically, be obsessed with it, and try and remove each and every point of friction? Because so many times we just say, you know what, this is how it's always done. Let it be. That is not going to cut it. I don't think that cut it before. It's certainly not going to cut the world that we live in. So put yourself and your customer.
No, Karen, sorry. No, I was just interested because actually what you're talking about there is actually digital payments opens the door to actually an education on good business. It's not just about a form of payment.
Absolutely right. And look, the best digital payments, in my opinion, are the invisible digital payments. Yeah. Right? Which is, it's so deeply embedded in what you're doing that it's just a natural continuation of what's happening, so that you don't physically do anything about it. However, and this is important, right? However, with that comes education, with that comes responsibility, and with that comes the need to make sure the consumer understands what they're doing and understands how to protect themselves.
Let's return to the optimism that you opened with. And one thing that struck me from the findings in this is that It's perhaps understandable that businesses are optimistic in the UAE, given the incredible response that we've had to the pandemic and the safety and security and prosperity that the government's built in with its handling of the pandemic. But this is a global report, and it shows global optimism. Even though we are seeing some variants in Omicron and that sort of thing play through, we're still seeing optimism. Talk to us about the kind of that global optimism, which gives us all kind of cause for hope.
Sure. So look, I think the one thing I will say is, yes, there is optimism across the globe, but in this and some of the other work that we've done, what we have very clearly seen is that both recovery and optimism tends to be linked to what's going on in the local economies, which inherently tends to be linked at a lot of the vaccination rates.
Yeah.
So the regions and the countries that are more vaccinated or more protected are able to come out of it faster, and therefore, correspondingly, we see a much higher level of optimism in those societies this year, right? We see an incredible amount of optimism, 90% plus, whereas in some of the other economies that are perhaps not quite as vaccinated, not quite as open yet, the level of optimism is a bit lower. But by and large, the level of optimism is high because we are starting to see a little bit more of a return to normalcy.
Yeah.
Perhaps the last couple of weeks notwithstanding, in general, there is a move towards this, right? There are vaccines, there are drugs, cross-border travel is opening up, people are returning. So by and large, I think we see that.
I mean, it's interesting having an organization like Bloomberg. Apparently, there are other media organizations out there, other than Raven Business, but they've got their coronavirus resilience ranking for nations across the world. And of course, the UAE has topped it, is always in the top 3. So it's interesting to see that almost like a vaccination rate becomes a fundamental for indicator for an economy these days. If we dial back down to the small businesses, because this was obviously the SMB report as well, the volume on small businesses and that conversation when we look at the world, the pandemic revealed purpose to a lot of people. The Great Resignation is abroad in the world, and lots of people are leaning into wanting to become their own small business. And then you've got research in there that shows that actually consumers, particularly here in the UAE, are really, really happy to support small business. So is 2022 the year that people should be prepared to leap off that cliff and start their own venture?
A very interesting question. And again, if you look at it globally, there is data which shows that as we emerge from tough times, that is when entrepreneurship tends to peak. That is where a lot more people go and start their own thing, because a lot of people see a lot of opportunity and they see how things have not worked and they see ways in which they can make it better. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more of that coming out. I think the other very interesting thing that we're seeing, and this is a global phenomenon, is very much the rise of conscious consumer, which is I, as a consumer, want to shop with and deal with other businesses that share my beliefs, share my purpose. And we're starting to see a lot of small businesses carve out niches for themselves because it's much easier for them to establish themselves based on a business, on a purpose that resonates with the consumers.
Question connected to entrepreneurship. And this is the headline that we've been reporting on this week, which is Dubai Free Zones Council looking at the access to business banking for small businesses. And one of the frustrations that's coming out of the small business community is it can take anywhere between 2 to 6 months to try and open a business bank account here. So what's your view on that? And it's great to see that the Free Zones Council is actually looking at this seriously. And how can Visa support growing ventures, particularly if they're facing something like that?
Yeah. So look, you're right. A lot of small businesses, when they're looking to open up bank accounts, it is challenging. Not only does it take a lot of time, it actually can cost quite a bit of money. And exactly, not just the first time, even the subsequent renewals. And this is a tricky one, right? Because on one hand, you want to say, listen, make it as easy as possible for a small business to be able to enter the financial fold and to be able to then go ahead and be a part of the larger community, access as customers, all of that. On the other hand, the banks also have a responsibility to make sure that they do the due diligence, because if we're not careful and if we leave the net too wide, a lot of bad actors can creep in. So it's about an act. right?
Yeah.
Especially with the existing technology. So one of the things that we are very, very focused on is we understand this, we recognize this, and we believe that one way of addressing this challenge is by the use of technology, or bringing in new technology, new solutions. So we are working with a lot of our different acquirers and players on decreasing the cost for the merchants to enter this financial fold, and to make it a lot easier for them, to make it a lot digital, and to use a lot of the big data solutions that are out there to mitigate a lot of the risk. So for example, one such solution is, we have what we call tap to pay, which is, as a merchant, I no longer need to have a very expensive point of sale device. I can just use my cell phone, and I can download software on that. That can be my till. So there are solutions like this that we're working on. I can plug in and create a larger purpose or a larger play that banks can then use to service a lot of these loans.
Is that part of the work? Because I know obviously we were covering this recently with Arabian Business. We spoke at your brand new headquarters here in Dubai, and you've got an innovation center there. Is that part of the agenda, part of the mission for the innovation center?
It is part of the agenda and part of the mission for Visa in general across the globe. So we have very globally committed that over the next few years, we will work with about 50 million SMEs across the world and bring them into the financial fold. I'm very, very proud to say that over the last 2 to 3 years, we have already met more than half of that 50 million. And we will continue to work tirelessly to bring in not only that 50, but even more into the financial fold.
You have been incredibly generous with your time this morning, so I'm going to throw one final question at you. So, prediction, how long? When are we going to say ROP to that paper stuff?
Look, I think this is one of those things where, there was, if you remember a couple of years ago, death of branches. When will the last branch ever be seen? Branches are here, branches will continue to be here. I think cash is similar. I don't think we will ever see it completely go away, but I think we will see it being displaced in a very, very large part. And I would say, especially in some of our countries, we're pretty close to being there.
Absolutely. I tell you, if I can't pay with my face these days on an app, I'm very frustrated. So, Dr. Saeeda, you've been incredibly generous. Great to talk to you again, and thank you very much. And fascinating research in that back to business. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Always a pleasure. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
You too.